Welcome, everyone, to our career webinar for this week. We are grateful to have you joining us today. We have a special guest, Landon Eyre. He has joined a couple of our career chats in the past, talking about his time working at LinkedIn and giving some tips. And today we just are so fortunate to have him in this webinar where he will be answering questions from students. We have several students from a diverse region of Australia and Latin America, as well as Africa. And we're so grateful for this, and the Philippines. And we're so grateful to have everyone taking time out of their day to be there. We are grateful for those of you who are watching live on YouTube or later. For those of you who are watching live, we will give you an opportunity if you would like to write some questions or comments in the message board on YouTube. I will be monitoring that, and we'll try to take a couple questions that you might have from the audience. So with that introduction, we had a prayer in our practice session earlier. We'll just jump right in and give Landon Eyre an opportunity to introduce himself, and then we'll start taking questions. So Landon, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Grant. Really honored and grateful to be here. I am such a big believer in BYU Pathways and just the journey it is to invest in yourself, to provide for your family, to deepen your education. So my name's Landon Eyre. I live in New York. I'm from Chicago originally, and I just give a quick work history here. So I grew up in Chicago and was able to attend BYU in Utah. I studied finance, and I told these guys ahead of time I was not a very good finance major, but it really helped me build the business language and some of those business fundamentals. I was able to serve a 2-year mission in Bolivia. My heart is still in Latin America and in Bolivia. I just love my time there, and it made me better at my job today. And then over the course of the last couple of years, I've been fortunate to work at companies like Google and LinkedIn, and then Adobe, and now Microsoft. And like I said, my wife and I, we live in New York now. We have 2 little girls, a 3-year-old and a 2-month-old. And we've lived in places like North Carolina, New York, as well as we spent a year and a half in Singapore. So we a lot of these regions that you're calling in from, we've spent time there and we just absolutely adore.
So Landon, in your introduction earlier, that you've got a family that you're growing and raising, and I made the comment that this is a real treat. A lot of times we have people with that are older than my age, and so
Yeah.
we're just so lucky to have someone that is a little bit more in the age range that a lot of our students are, raising a family and all that. What have you found has been one of the challenges, and how have you overcome those challenges in raising a family while starting a career? In the tech industry, it's always, I'm sure, just fast pace.
Yeah.
And so maybe you could kind of speak to what you're doing right now and how you're kind of finding that balance.
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head. I remember when we had our first daughter, I told my wife I felt like I lost control and I was unable to be good at my job, a good father, and a good husband, and also do my calling, right? There was just I didn't have enough time to be good at all of them. And it's very much an imperfect science, but what I've found is number one, my each of those times has to be highly concentrated at what I'm doing. So when I'm at work, I try to be really at work and really leverage that time to deliver impact. And then when I'm at home, I try to really engage with what's happening at home. So I think my wife and daughters would say that I'm not great at that, but really just allocating the time and ensuring that that time allows me to be good at what I do is key. And then, I'm a big believer in it doesn't matter from where you work or when you work, it matters on what you deliver. So impact is the most important thing as you think about your career and being able to one execute and then also in a non-braggy way share what you're doing so those around you are aware, really key.
So Landon, you're currently working for Microsoft in sales, and I think that all of us know that when you're working with a big company, whether it's LinkedIn or Microsoft or Adobe or in a really fast-paced environment in software, and this exists in many different industries, but when you're kind of in that top tier company, they have a lot of employees that they can bring on, or sorry, they have
Yeah.
a lot of candidates that
Yes.
applied for their jobs, and I'm sure that there's a lot of people from around the world that will apply. And so it's a very competitive environment that you come into. Being in that environment where you're working for Microsoft, for example, right now, and you know that there's a lot of people that are trying to get into that company. You're going to be rubbing shoulders with the people that have kind of raised the bar at many different levels. When you work with your coworkers, what are the qualities that you find to be really beneficial, or that really kind of helps you realize, okay, that's why they probably came on board, because they had these qualities? What are some of the things that you would say, as you have worked with a lot of these individuals, that helps you recognize that in their career, these are the things that really
Yeah.
set them apart?
Yeah, great question. There are three things that I think about. Number one is you have to be interesting. When I was working at Google, I remember asking a coworker, how does a BYU student, which BYU is a great school, but it doesn't compete with like a Stanford or a Harvard, how does a BYU student go land these types of jobs? And he said, look, there are a lot of smart people in the world. At the end of the day, people hire people. They hire people that they want to spend time with. And so developing yourself outside of just work, having opinions on whether it's you read, you have hobbies, those types of things are interesting and make people want to spend time with you. That's number one. Number two is there's a scrappiness about them. The beauty of BYU Pathways is at the aggregate, you guys we're raising the tide. The challenge is you're also competing with each other for jobs. And I say that with very friendly competition. And so if all, 200 people on this call are doing the exact same things, it's really hard to differentiate. And those that make it are scrappy. They're willing to do what others are not willing to do. BYU Pathways is a great example of this. And I've spoken on other calls. You have the world's technology at your fingertips. And so if you went deep and said, I'm going to be an AI expert, you can go on YouTube and become an AI expert. And so there's the scrappiness. And then the last one is being able to identify what you're good at and lean into it. I think far too often people try to mitigate their weaknesses, which is a good process, but they forget to find out what they're good at and really lean into it. I give one quick anecdote. When I was at BYU, I was part of the BYU finance program, and they were taking a group of 30 students to go to San Francisco to meet with Google and LinkedIn and Pinterest. And I applied to go on the trip, and they told me that my GPA wasn't high enough to be included, which was very frustrating for me. And I sat there and thought, I'm not going to let this random person decide if I can go talk to these companies. So I got on LinkedIn and I started networking with individuals at these companies. I booked my own trip. I drove out to San Francisco. It was a 10-hour drive, and went and slept on my sister's couch and went and took 10 people out to lunch at these companies. And from that trip, I landed an internship at Google and then my full-time offer at LinkedIn. And what I realized is if you're only looking at my resume, I'm not going to get hired. And so I had to find ways to do something that one leaned into my strength, which was being in person, and also just get scrappy. And so those are some of the characteristics I see among my coworkers as well.
Thank you, Landon. I love the word scrappy. I'm gonna have to look that one up.
Yeah, no job is beneath you. You're right that your hands are
Okay,
dirty. You're right in the mix of it.
love it, love it. Well, I've asked enough questions already. I'm sure I'll have a few more. We've brought students from around the world, and we'll invite them to raise their hand virtually to ask some questions. And so, those of you who are joining with me, why don't you go ahead and ask your question? Anyone that would like to go first? Okay, go ahead, Anna.
Okay, thank you. Landon, you are so young and you're so successful. You have many leadership positions. Um, as maybe you might be aware that a lot of BYU Pathway students, they come from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And some students might struggle with confidence.
hmm
And so my question is, do you have a personal confidence formula? And would you please share it with our students?
Anna,
Thank you.
that's a great question. This is one that I've thought a lot about. I will preface by saying I'm irrationally confident by nature, which gets me in trouble at times. But the question I would pose back to you, let's say there's a job that feels out of reach. My question is, why not? Right? And I think sometimes we self-select out of the process. We say, like, they are never going to take a chance on me. Well, I would so much rather hear that from them than do that to myself, because you never know what's going to click. And the other thing is, what I always tell myself is they're going to hire someone. Why can't it be me? Now, at the end of the day, we have a finite amount of time, right? So if you are continually applying to be a brain surgeon without any background in that, it's not going to be the best use of your time. But sometimes we hold ourselves back from taking, swings because we just feel like there's not a chance in the world. So I would say they're going to hire someone. Why not you? And number two is let them be the one to say no. And over time, you're going to find yourself in situations that are above your pay grade, and that's a great problem to have. The other thing I would say, Anna, is no one knows what they're doing. So, I can list all these cool little accomplishments. And to your point, I've just stumbled into some really cool opportunities, and none of us know what we're doing. And that's okay. That's just like, that's part of life.
You use the word stumble into opportunities, and I think that is kind of taken into consideration that not everything goes according to our plan.
Yeah.
But the stumbling happened probably because you actually worked for it, that it wasn't like it just fell into your hands. You
Yeah.
were probably planning one thing and then something else happened, but it's because you actually did something.
Yeah, exactly. I always say you have to play with the deck you've been given. There are folks, even on this call with the 10 of us, we've each gotten different deck of cards, if you will. And for some of us, those decks look really good from the start, and some you have to work at it, but you have to play with the deck that you have. So what are you going to do with it? And then, when my wife and I talk about our career, we oftentimes talk about what opens doors for us, right? Oftentimes our careers are not linear. And so it is, we try to take opportunities that will open more doors in the future. We don't want to feel claustrophobic. And so that's just one way we think about it.
That's great. Anyone else that would like to ask a question here? Go ahead. We'll go with Lita or Lit- Litasi.
All right, awesome. I'll go. Cool. I love how you said that we tend to be the ones to hold ourselves back. And I 100% agree with that. I think our worst critics is our own state of mind sometimes. So I wanted to ask you a question and have the opportunity to steal your mindset. What are some tips and tricks that you do to take you from who you are to the person that you're wanting to become or that you're yet to become?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't feel qualified to answer this. I think I guess the first thing is marry well, because there's nothing that's helped me reach my potential more than who I married. So that's number one. The second thing is that, this idea of faking it till you make it, a lot of times has a negative connotation. And I'm just a big believer in it, right? If you act the way you want to be, eventually you will be that way. And so if you want to be, well, I'll give you a story that I once heard. I once heard there was a missionary traveling in the car with, I think it was President Kimball, and they were listening to a talk, and this missionary mentioned to President Kimball, I wish I knew the scriptures like they did. And President Kimball said, no, you don't, or else you would do it, right? And so each of us have this vision of who we want to be, and it's just the daily actions that we take day to day. We just layer on brick by brick, right? And so sometimes we set such lofty goals that when we fall short, we think we have to start all the way over and we lose momentum. And so figure out who you want to be, back into what the actions and the daily tasks of that person would be, and then start laying those bricks day by day and surround yourself with people that pull your potential out of you.
Great advice. Savannah, you had your hand raised. Do you have a question you'd like to ask?
Oh, yes. Landon's experience is very inspiring, and I know as students, we got a lot of inspiration to do. But Landon, as students, um, how do you think we can prepare, or the other students as well? How do you think the students can prepare themselves to work with or within large multinational tech companies like Microsoft, Google, and LinkedIn, and etc.?
Yeah, it's a great question. A couple of thoughts. Number one, you have to be very comfortable with ambiguity, especially in the tech industry. It's a blessing and a curse, but it's not overly formulaic. And so when you look at some industries like finance, they tell you what color suit to wear, what questions to be ready for in the interview. There's a very defined career path. Tech is oftentimes quite chaotic and ambiguous, which can make it very difficult to break into it, because I can't sit here today and give you a formula of what works. And so I come back to that scrappy, and that scrappy nature of tech, which is how are you going to get in? And then what will you do with ambiguity? Can you bring order to the chaos? And so where you can find, and I think that maybe the best way we see this is you hear this a lot in any industry working cross-functionally, which is how within your role can you organize a team, coordinate a project with people in different roles that have different incentives and thought processes. And we can get that type of experience even in like a ward council, if you will, right? Each organization has a different perspective on where they're starting in, but collectively we're moving to a common goal. So that's number one. Number two, I think we oftentimes fail to prepare for interviews like we should. So I'm going to give you two pieces of advice as you interview for these companies. Number one, if it's a publicly traded company in the US and in most parts of the world, there are regulations on what they have to submit from a tax documentation to make things public. And in the US, we call these 10Ks, which is the annual summary of these companies. And so if you search like Microsoft 10K, for example, you will find this. And it's Microsoft outlining what our strategy is, who our competitors are, what our risks are. If you want to speak in the language of the company you're interviewing in, go read the 10K. It is the greatest piece of information that you can have. The second thing I'd say is go listen to their leadership team speak, go find them on YouTube and hear the things that they are thinking and caring about. Sometimes I'll talk to someone who's preparing for an interview at Microsoft, and they're focused on this niche part of our business that I haven't even heard of. And I'll try to re-guide them to where our executives are thinking, what we are telling our shareholders that we focus on. So, like I said, can you deal with ambiguity and work cross-functionally, right? And in any job you're in right now, we can find experience that you can then use in an interview. And then number two, how do we prepare? When I was interviewing at LinkedIn, I had spent time in the 10K, and in the 10K, they outlined what % of revenue came from each part of their business line. And when I got in, that was the first question one of my interviewers asked. And I think that is the reason I got the job, because it was not an indication that I understood their business. It was an indication that I was willing to put in the work to prepare.
Setting yourself apart from a lot of other candidates that are interviewing for a job is difficult, and you can't like guess on everything, but doing homework does make a big difference. And Landon, you briefly mentioned this at the beginning, but you talked a little bit more about this before. I probably fall into the same category that I try really hard to do well in school, but I just didn't test very well, and therefore my GPA wasn't like on the top end. And so I had to kind of fine tune other talents to kind of set me apart from others when I was going in there. Could you speak to that a little bit? I mean, your experience is going to be different. So just speak to your experience. Like, what are some of those talents that said, okay, I didn't excel here, so I worked on this. Why don't you share that story?
Yeah, of course. So spot on. I realized pretty quickly at BYU that I was a good enough student. I was never going to be a great student. And some of you heard my dad speak. I just blame genetics on that one. That's on him, right? But I had friends who would go spend 30 hours in the library trying to be the great student. And it just, though I really admired their effort, there were better opportunities to spend their time. So for me, like I mentioned, I realized pretty quickly that I'm good with people. I'm better in person. And then number two, and Savannah, I kind of come back to your question with this, was I think I learned how to be a very good storyteller, which is key to any role you go into. And like I mentioned with that anecdote of me driving out to San Francisco, is I realized that my strength was in person, which for many of you across the world, that's not on the table right now, which is fine. So you have to find a way to mitigate that a little bit, but Zoom helps. And then that's what I leaned into. Now, the important thing is my GPA did not plummet in this process. I still had to maintain it so that it was good enough, but then I focused on my pillars and strengths, where I'm a very good networker. And so I knew my resume was never going to get pulled because of my GPA, but it could get pulled because I'd put in the time to get to know the people at the company who could then vouch for me. And so to your point, it's how are you introspective enough to understand what you're good at, and then let those things be the catalyst to your opportunity.
That's great. I think it's wonderful because it gives hope for, where we may not excel in one thing.
Yeah.
It's not like it's the end of the world. We just need to find where our strengths are. God's given us all different talents. And so identifying those talents that will line well with job opportunities. While I give the panel an opportunity to raise their hand to ask a question, I'm going to read one or two questions here from the audience that are joining us today. This one's from Alice. She says, "Hi, Landon. For some of us who want to take some courses on LinkedIn or Microsoft, what can you recommend as a teacher to increase my chances of getting a better job?"
Great question. The risk that we have with having the world's information at our fingertips is that we spend time in areas that don't yield a return. And so my recommendation is look at the field that you're interested in and understand the niche areas where you can become an expert in them. So for example, as I'm in tech sales, if I go spend a ton of time learning how to be a great fisher on like fishing on YouTube, that will be a waste of my time. But if I look at my industry and say, hey, artificial intelligence is coming, I want to be the best of my peers in how I talk about that. I'm going to go sharpen the axe and really spend some time learning that. So, Alice, my advice would be, number one, understand the industry that you're interested in. Number two, go read through what the trends are. And when I come back to these 10Ks that I mentioned earlier, they talk about the opportunities that are coming. And so it may be worthwhile going and reading 5 10Ks of companies that dominate your industry and seeing what they say are the trends that are coming and then investing time accordingly. The other thing I'd recommend is there are certifications that you can get that are, it would be like me giving you a certification. I have no grounds to do that. There are more official certifications that hold weight. And so if you're going to spend some time, do the research ahead of time to understand what the output is. And if the only output is that you are more well-read and can speak to this theme, that's great. But if the goal is certification, which for some of these themes would be really helpful, make sure you're getting an accredited one that carries weight in your field. The one last thing I would say is, along with the world's technology and information, we have such great technology that can help you with this. I've done demos on this in past sessions with BYU-Pathways, but I would go to ChatGPT and say, I am hoping to break in. I live in South Africa. I'm hoping to break into the technology sector in the United States and work virtually. Number one, help me understand what trends I should be spending my time learning on, and then recommend course certifications that I can do. Now, you need to do your own research to verify what it's saying, but leverage the technology as it exists to help you move through this more quickly.
That kind of goes along with another question that one of the students asked online here, and I'm going to read it, and then we're going to go to Komla or Coleman. This is from Bongwe. I have a question. How can AI practically assist both learners and teachers in improving study methods and class preparation, especially in understanding schools, or under-resourced schools?
Yeah, this is a great question. I am not qualified to answer this at length, but what I would say is, and I'm gonna answer this in two ways. Number one, when we read about like the gold rush, for example, there's a common expression that the people who made the money were those selling the pickaxes. And what I mean by that is AI is not necessarily going to replace our jobs, but it's the people who know how to use AI that will replace our jobs. And so if you can learn how to write a prompt that gets what people want out of ChatGPT, for example, you will have an incredibly marketable skill. When we think about learning and development in regions all across the world, it is this AI, access to AI is the great democratization of like high-level learning. And so being able to ask a prompt like what we talked about to help identify where you should zero in, where you should focus is going to be really meaningful. Maybe instead of reading the 10K reports of these customers, you ask AI to go read them for you and identify the trends and strategic opportunities that these companies identify, and then you let that be the way to move forward. So if you're not using AI in parallel to help in your career development, I would highly recommend it. I think every field is going to be touched by it, and we know it's coming, and there are people lazier than you, and so you can get out ahead and have an advantage.
As you're talking about, AI and utilizing it to kind of help you kind of get ahead and give you that competitive advantage. I think if you could demonstrate to an employer how hyper productive you are, how super productive you are, they're going to be really interested in you. Now, the challenge is showing how showing someone else how you are exactly what it is that they're looking for. But if you could demonstrate that, you're going to stand out.
Yeah.
Komlan, go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I want to know what are some of the mistakes we, the student, we do make that prevent us to get the opportunity present to us. I could say that I myself, I have tried at least 2 times to work with Bloom.
Yeah.
I got bounced yesterday again, and I was sad the whole day.
Yeah.
So I would like to know, what am I doing wrong as English as a second language student?
Yeah.
I speak French too. And I want to know, what shall I do to get opportunity to work? Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a great question. Without knowing the specifics of your situation, a couple thoughts. Number one, sometimes we work very hard and we don't work very smart. So I'll give you an example. With so a lot of these large companies, they have a referral process whereby, for example, I could refer a friend as they apply to the job. So at Google, your odds of being hired go up 10x if you have a referral. So sometimes I work with people trying to find a job and they'll say, I applied to 200 companies and didn't hear back from any of them. I'll say, okay, did you just drop your resume in? Or did you take the time to go develop a network, chat with people that work there, lead with curiosity, right? And let them help open the door for you versus you just kicking the door in. So number one is work smarter, not harder. And then, and this kind of feeds into my second one, which is curiosity and authenticity take you very far in this world. And a lot of times, and we've all been in this situation, we are so desperate to find that opportunity that our networking becomes unilateral, meaning I become almost like a leech. I reach out to someone and it's, what can you do for me? Now, if someone's reaching out to me, I don't have a huge incentive to respond unless it's just out of the goodness of my heart. So my recommendation would be, remember that networking is a bilateral motion. And you may feel like you don't have a lot to offer right now. And I would push back on that. I recently had a call with someone about a career, and we talked about a variety of things. And at the end of it, he sent me an article and said, hey, I just read this. It reminded me of something we talked about. I thought you'd find it interesting. And just like that, he changed the relationship from being him only needing me to him providing value back to me. And my desire to help him along the way just increased dramatically. So you may feel like you lack, I don't know, resources or ability to provide back. But for example, Colin, you speak French. That is such an amazing asset that many people lack, right? Maybe there's someone who their child wants to learn French and you could offer to coach them along the way as they coach you with their career stuff, right? Find ways to give back. And then Coleman, also realize inevitably our careers are going to be filled with high highs and low lows. And though it can be very discouraging, two things. Number one, our Heavenly Father is so proud of the effort that we're putting in, right? To better ourselves, to better our familial circumstances. This is almost a sacred journey we're on. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. But number two, it is oftentimes how we respond to these moments that have the biggest bearing on our career, right? When the stock market drops, there's a whole lot of people that make a lot of money. And so as the economy shifts, what are we doing to use this as an opportunity? And so it's okay to have that bad day, but now we're in that new day and it's okay. What do I learn from this? How do I take this and move forward?
Great advice. I've lost a job 2 or 3 times in my career, and I understand the feeling of, it's like it's so deflating.
Yeah.
And one of the traps is you just keep thinking about, what could I have done different? What kind of led to this? And we just get stuck into this evaluation, and it's healthy until it's too much.
Yeah.
And you just have to make that call as to what is too long, what's too much. You have to look forward. And your new job is finding a job. And I love what Landon said, is that in this new job that you have, work really smart. I would say that there have been a few times in my career where I'm interviewing people, and they would tell me that they, it would be email. They would say something like, "I've sent my resume out to 100 people and no one's responded," or I would hear that from someone else. And it's like, well, then we need to look at what you're doing is not working. Let's find a different way. What needs to change here? And you just need to sometimes take a break to where you're focusing on what are my next tasks, to where you write them down and you go before the Lord in asking you to kind of be smart about how, what are the things that you need to be working on. Obviously, sending out resumes are great, but maybe you need to spend 80% of your time networking. And that will, we don't know your situation, but I feel for you. I've gone through that, and it can be hard. Just don't get stuck into reevaluating the past, just looking forward and planning. That's great.
I just love what you said there. Let's take the job hunt, for example, right? It's probably the most discouraging thing. I remember when I graduated BYU, my dad said, "You're going to face more rejection now than ever before." And I said, "Well, I served a mission." And he said, "No, no, no, this will be worse." And my recommendation when I work with people, right? If you picture it like a formula, you have uh, getting an interview, multiple interviews, getting an offer. And you should take a step back and look, where am I failing in this process, right? If you are applying to a ton of places and not getting an interview, there are two thoughts. Number one, we should relook at your resume. And number two, how are you networking? If you're getting the interview but never getting moved on from that second interview, I'd say we need to work on your storytelling, etc. And if you get to the final round but aren't getting the offer, how do you close the deal, right? And so, Kamlan, as you reflect back, almost be like surgical. It's tough. It's tough. Try to remove some of the emotion and say, what went wrong? And there's a chance it was totally external. It had nothing to do with you. But you also may find a couple nuggets of like, okay, there's an opportunity here for me to pivot and continue on, or this is going to be an inflection point. So anyways, I love that thought.
I'm going to jump to a question that David asked, who's watching online. He says, "Hi, Landon. Earlier you said that if these companies would have only looked at your resume, you wouldn't be hired. In your experience, what is a good way to demonstrate your skills through your resumes or through your resume?" I have a thought on that, but I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah, a couple thoughts. Number one is show, don't tell. And then the second one is with every bullet point, you should ask yourself, so what? And so I was meeting with a friend. He was reviewing my resume, and he looked at a bullet and he said, "So what?" And I'm like, "What do you mean, so what? I built this cool thing." He's like, "Why should I care?" And so you want to take that leap to showcasing and making it very clear what the value is, right? As a future employer, I should be able to read a bullet and understand why. So I'll give you a very tangible example I see from BYU-Pathway students all the time. It's phenomenal to include your mission or church experience, whether it's callings or whatever, in your resume. But if you put on there, "I'm the executive secretary in my stake," most likely your employer will not know any of those words, right? They have no context on what that means. But if instead you say, coordinating the schedule of executive and planning biannual 1,000-person conference with these things, all of a sudden those are business transferable skills that anyone could understand. And so, like I said, show, don't tell, right? Don't tell me what you did. Show me with like numbers and guidance, and then ask yourself, so what? And it'll really push you hard. We spend far too little time on our resumes. You should be combing over that word by word to make sure that each word helps your candidacy.
And I would also add, just put it in front of a lot of people.
Yeah.
You might not be able to catch everything. Use AI to help you finesse your resume. Don't let it write it for you,
Yeah.
but it could probably point out a couple of things that you had never really thought about. One thing that I would say is that if you're applying for a job where you are the perfect fit, like you hit all of the check marks, make sure that your resume includes all the keywords so that if a computer is scrubbing your resume along with, 1,000 others, it will at least plug you into the top 10%. So
Yeah.
if you hit all the check marks, make sure you've got all the keywords that will kind of get you in front of a live person that is reviewing. If you are a good candidate and you may not hit all of those check marks, but you have other talents that they probably won't write down but they are looking for, find every possible way to get that resume in front of the decision maker, the hiring manager, whoever it is, in a non-conventional way, through a common friend or through an associate that knows you. If for example, if I have a friend that's working at the company that I'm applying for, even if it's not a really good friend, but it's someone that would return my call. They know my number if I were to call them, that kind of relationship. I would never submit my resume online. I would call up that friend. I would message that friend and say, hey, I want to apply for this position. You can still fill it out online, but get that resume in through another avenue, through a back door. It just, they could put it at the top of the pack of the stack of resumes. Anyway, that was great. Okay, Etcher, will you do you have a question? Go ahead and take your mic off mute. We'd love to hear it.
Yeah, Landon, as you shared, you went through different roles in sales, executive, and finance, and other ones. But what is the one was one of the hardest thing you done that teach you a valuable principle in your life that you can share with us?
It's a great question. So I had been at LinkedIn for about a year and a half, and my boss approached me and asked me to move to Singapore to go build out a team there. Now, I should clarify, I was wildly inexperienced for what they were asking me to do, but I had the benefit of longevity on the team. I had the longest tenure, and I remember calling my dad and saying, "This is terrifying." And he said, "What's the worst thing that happens?" And I said, I get fired. That feels pretty bad." And he said, "Okay, you get fired, but you get this amazing experience along the process, along the way." And I think sometimes we prioritize the wrong things, and prioritizing learnings and experience just opens future doors. And so I was way out of my, it was a really hard job. It was way above my pay grade, and I figured it out. And that kind of comes back to Anna's question. A lot of times we look at roles or projects or things that we have that we feel like we don't know what we're going to do. We are incredibly resilient, bright people. We will figure it out, and no one knows what they're doing. So it was such a good learning for me to go kind of take a risk and bet on myself. And it was really hard, and it was so rewarding and opened a lot of doors. The other thing is, this isn't directly related, but you mentioned I've been in a lot of roles. A lot of times we get zeroed in on a specific role that we want. And my recommendation would be, once you get in the foot in the door, you can move. It's far easier to move around a company than it is to get into the company the first time. So if you're looking at a role and you think, man, it's not exactly what I want to do, but you feel like you have a shot, go interview. If you can get the job, once you're in the company and you can prove value, that's far better than anything you could show in an interview, and then you can move around. So, anyways, I didn't totally answer your question, Ether, but my main piece of advice is seek out, be deliberate and relentless about seeking experience and learnings. And if you feel like you're not getting that in your career and you feel like it's holding you back, go volunteer in your community. Go find opportunities to lead and get, to Savannah's question, cross-functional experience in your community that you can then speak to on your resume and in interviews.
I love that. You know, when you talk about moving within an organization, I've often thought, why is it that you can move within the organization and get other positions so much easier than coming from the outside? And it's really because the moment that you're in the company, all of a sudden you start to assimilate a broader network within that company.
Yeah.
They start to see the product that you're producing and the quality that of work that you're bringing to the table. And I remember I came in right out of college. I started with the company. I worked really hard, and I put in the hours, and it was. I remember boss saying, "You know, I should get a raise for hiring you." It's like I tried to make my boss look so good, and that he started to recognize that, and then his superior started to recognize it. And so when you go to an organization, you know, you don't want to be so self-focused on yourself, but definitely be focused on trying to make your coworkers look really good. And if anyone, your boss look really good, and it definitely helps. That's great.
That comes back to the conversation we had with Savannah, which is some of the skills that are needed and the ambiguity. Sometimes we just wait for that checklist. Like, I did my job perfectly. And to your point, if you can go look at what is on your boss's plate and start easing their burden, that is a quick path to promotion is when you make your boss look good and make their life easier. And that's something that may not be on your job description, but that's an easy way to progress in your career.
All right. Let's go to Savannah. Do you have another question that you'd like to ask, Savannah? And then we'll go to Anna after.
Yes. So here's my question again. So for the other students who don't have access to advanced tools or in any tech environments, so what do you think will be the best way for them to still stay competitive and be qualified for that kind of industry?
It's a great question. I guess what I would say is, once again, you have to play with the deck you've been given. And so there are a lot of free tools out there. And so leverage what is available to all. And it's tough, right? Like there are inherent disadvantages that each of us have, and you have to figure out how to work around that. So yeah, I would say leverage the resources and assets that you have, and you know, in some ways, don't worry about what you can't control. If there's something that you truly do not have access to, you work around it and you move on. But it's tough. There are, in different parts of the world, even if it's as simple as like internet speed may prevent certain technologies from being used. And so you have to mitigate where you can.
That's great. Thank you. Anna, go ahead.
Well, Landon, you sound very busy. So what does your usual day look like?
Yeah, great question. This morning, my toddler woke up at 5:30 in the morning just to hang out. Her head popped off the pillow. But that's just the beauty of it. So we're usually up around 6. I try to leave for work around 8:30 to be in the office by 9. One of the sacrifice is the wrong word because I do it any day, but I'm far more productive in the morning. And so before we had kids, I always preferred to get in around 7:30, and those first 2 hours of the day is when I did most of my work. But since having kids, that's just special time. I would not give up that morning. So I'm usually in by 8:30 or 9. My day, so for context, I do sales for Microsoft. I cover the big four accounting firms, so PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, and EY, specifically in Latin America. So about half my day is in Spanish, which what I always tell the customers, I learned my Spanish on a mission. So if they have questions about religion, my Spanish is impeccable. When they get to technology, it's a little tough. But really, my whole focus in my day is how we deliver value to these individuals. And then I try to be home around 5. The beauty of my role in tech sales is I have a lot of flexibility. And then, from 5 to 7:30, make it intense family time. And then occasionally at night, I log back on and do some more work. But like I said, I really try when I'm at work, I try to lock in on work and get the most out of my day so that when I'm home, I have the luxury of being able to just spend time with my family.
As you're talking about family and spending time, and I'm going to ask a question, then I'm going to come to Alatasi to have her ask a question. You mentioned that when you went to Singapore, it was a stretch for you. And obviously they gave that to you because they saw that you probably had the capacity, maybe not the experience. So as you went to a completely different country, a new area, culture changes, how did you put together a team? Like as you go down there, how did you run a team? How did you put it together? What were the things that you're looking for? Because as you're trying to be successful in this new position, in this new location, in this new job, I'm sure you recognize that who reports to you and who works with you was a big part of your success.
Yeah.
So what did you do to make sure that you were successful in a new area, completely new environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say, a lot of people, many of you on this call may have no desire to ever be in sales, which is fine. My argument to you is every job is sales. And so on day one, it was me walking around the office, just walking up to people's desks to introduce myself. Because my first thing was I had to get buy-in from the folks that were already there. LinkedIn already had a presence in Asia. We just didn't have my organization there. And that is thankfully where my skill set lies is I am irrationally confident and very extroverted. But it was first that some of that internal selling to get people bought in on what we were doing. And then to your point, building out the team and where having a good understanding of your strengths and weaknesses really allowed me to go mitigate my weaknesses by hiring people that were good at the things that I was bad at. And especially in a foundational team like that, um, making sure as I went through the interview process, I was looking for that, and I had a good enough understanding of where my strengths and weaknesses lie, so I could build around that was important. And then a huge piece for me was understanding some of the cultural nuances of working in a new country. And for many of you, in the conversations I've had, you aspire to work for maybe a French firm or a US firm. And my advice to you would be find the balance between proudly representing where you come from and your culture and your people, while also recognizing that in some ways you'll need to assimilate to a US or Europe company, right? There are maybe cultural things or business practices that may be foreign to you and will require some research, right? It's not fair, but there are people that are at a disadvantage because they are just come from different cultural backgrounds, and it's sadly incumbent on us to overcome that, to do the research ahead of time. So for me, going to Singapore and supporting all of Asia, so Japan, India, Australia, I really had to invest the time to understand what each business landscape and culture look like so that I could meet them where they were at, and it allowed me to be more successful.
Thank you. Alatasi, go ahead and ask your question.
Awesome. I guess my question, if you're comfortable in sharing, do you have a vision and a purpose? And if so, what are some things that you do to remain rooted in that vision and purpose?
It's a great question, Alatasi. I was just talking to someone about this because there are so many competing factors in our life, and well, I call it a scope creep, right? We have a limited scope, but things start creeping in all around it. And so it's really important that you stay grounded in the things that actually matter to you, right? For example, you may be given a job opportunity that would require you to work every Sunday and miss church. And you are then all of a sudden you're at a crossroads of where your priorities are. And I recognize that there are jobs all over the world and differing. That wasn't a commentary on church, is what I would say. So, but Alatasi, what I would say is, my wife stays at home with our girls. She does not work, but we talk about my career as our career. And so we frequently check in with each other on what are the things that matter to us the most, and are we still balancing our lives in such a way that allow for that? And then as we do that, we're able to avoid the distractions. So as things pop up that may be great in and of themselves, we come back to what are our core priorities as a family, whether it be for our career or our family, and how do we eliminate scope creep? That we will inevitably be spread too thin. It just is how it works. We all have the same amount of time during the day, and we need to ensure that we're allocating time to the things that matter most. And there is a time and season for everything. You will have times in your career where you get less time with your family than you would prefer, and maybe you're on the road more. And there are going to be times when your career slows down, right? This past week, randomly, my work has been very quiet. And so I'm leveraging that to get more time with my family. And so you have to be able to read the peaks and valleys of your day to day and be deliberate enough to allocate time. And then the last thing I'd say is we need to use call them the islands of time appropriately in our life. So we have a lot of 15-minute random chunks in our life that pop up. I'm oftentimes on like the ESPN app or Instagram, just wasting that time. But if you can be deliberate, you can leverage these islands of time, and on the aggregate, those start to add up in a meaningful way.
Landon, we have just a few more minutes. We'll go to a question from Coleman, and then I'm going to read one question here from the message here, and then we'll just have you wrap up. Go ahead, Coleman.
Yeah, I would like to know how can a student use effectively the LinkedIn or other platform to get job opportunity and connect with the employers?
It's a wonderful question. I think this is one of the most underutilized tools. And what I would say is, first and foremost, you do not need a premium membership to be able to leverage it well. If I share my screen quickly, will that pass through onto YouTube and everything?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Okay.
Yeah, it will show up on there, but you should be able to show your screen.
Okay, give me 1 second, because I think LinkedIn is wildly underutilized. So I'm going to do just a 2-minute demo on how to leverage LinkedIn appropriately. Give me a second here. Okay, can you see my screen?
Not yet. Oh, it's yes. Now we
Okay,
can.
so a lot of times when we think about LinkedIn, we think about our profile page. And this is really important. You need to spend the time because a lot of times this will be the first impression that future employers have of you. But what we fail to realize is that LinkedIn is our greatest networking tool to make meaningful connections. So I want to give you an example, and I've done this with some of you in the past. But let's say I aspire to work at Google. You can come to Google's page right here and use this to find folks that you may have similar backgrounds to. So maybe you don't personally know anyone at Google, but if you come to the People tab right here, and you can do this on your phone or on your computer, you can start to search through. So let's say I want to work at Google and I live in Australia. You may look, Australia. I may search through in this filter on the People tab, and it's going to show me folks that work in Google in Australia, right? And if you're going to start reaching out to people on LinkedIn, it would be better to reach out to folks that you have a slight connection with, right? Your odds of them responding go up. And so, for example, I do not know Stephen Andrew. He looks like a very nice guy. He's based in Australia. And when I click connect, let's see if this does this right. Otherwise, I might just be sending a random connection, which would be fine. So when I click connect here, you can add a note, and you may say, I'm based in Melbourne. I am so fascinated by your career path. I'd love to spend 15 minutes to just learn about your career. My advice would be don't lead with, hey, I want to work at Google. Lead with curiosity. People love talking about themselves. But this becomes really powerful. My other recommendation is you can just look at those who have ties to BYU, for example. And you're going to find you'll find people that have ties to BYU within the companies that you're looking for. So you could even do BYU Pathways and see if there are people that have similar backgrounds to you that have ties to BYU Pathways that are also connected to Google. So Coleman, my recommendation is this is something that everyone should spend some time working on or playing around with, but go make a list of the 10 companies you want to work at. And rather than just messaging random people where your response rate will only be 10%, identify people where you have common threads of overlap. Maybe they're in Africa. Maybe they have ties to the church, whatever it may be. And your odds of a response go up dramatically when you reach out to folks where there's a similar overlap.
That is an awesome tool. Thank you for showing us that, Landon. And I think that the principle is something that, whether it's LinkedIn or whatever, is an important one, which is, okay, think smartly about who do you know? Like, we've lived a good life. We've made good impressions on many people. And if you have that curiosity, there's going to be an avenue along the way. And it may not lead exactly to where you were destined, that you were projecting to go, but it may open up opportunities that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't know what we don't know. Landon, this has been wonderful. I'm going to ask one more question from what a student has here, and then we'll just have you just share some closing remarks after answering this question, and then maybe share your testimony, and then we'll finish up there. So this question is from one of the audience, Raul. I'm thinking about choosing a career in the business administration. What do you think about being an administrative assistant? The reason I picked that question out of probably another 10 other questions is I'm sure that there's a lot of things happening in the world changing. Many of the students are trying to get that remote job. And there's a lot to be said about local jobs, but there's a lot of people that are trying to get that remote job. AI is changing a lot of things. You're kind of in the forefront working with Microsoft, you're in sales. And so maybe in answering that question as to whether or not, what you think about going into business administration, not specifically that, but with AI and everything, there's going to be some questions like, okay, is this something I should go into? Because it's just changing so much. And I hear that, this job is not going to exist in 5 years. And anyway, maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, I come back to there are jobs that will be replaced inevitably, but those and this is very AI specific, but I think those who spend the time to understand how AI operates within reason will always have a purpose. So this kind of comes back to my comment on ambiguity before. If you look at the last 2 years, 20 years, 200 years, and the next 200 years, the business landscape is going to change dramatically. But it's those who are agile and flexible and can deal with the ambiguity that are going to figure out how to be successful. And some of that comes back to that quality of scrappiness, right? This unrelenting push to find that next foothold. BYU Pathways is this incredible opportunity for you. But if this is all you're doing, you're going to be sitting with, 1,000 other classmates who have very similar backgrounds and opportunities. Find ways to develop yourself, find ways to be interesting, and find ways to be flexible and agile. I will say, I don't think college is designed to teach us facts. I think it's designed to teach us how to be curious and thoughtful and to analyze a problem, right? And so as you go through your classes, keep that in mind, right? Is this teaching me how to think in new and creative ways that will inevitably open doors in the future? I guess I'll close with a couple thoughts and testimony here. I don't want this to sound condescending because we are peers in age and in many things, but I'm just proud of this group. I'm so inspired by folks who take time, who wake up at 2 a.m. to hear a stranger speak. I hope this was worth losing sleep. I'm inspired by people who invest in themselves every day. There's a, and I'll get to my testimony here in a minute, but one of the reasons I went back and got an MBA was because I want my kids to know that I value education and I value investing in myself. And so what you guys are doing today will have a ripple effect that will last for generations and in your community as well. I recognize that there are not enough jobs in your local markets or in the world that would perfectly meet everything you need. And so for some of you, your economic opportunity may not change dramatically, but you are changing in this process. I oftentimes think about Nephi in the Book of Mormon. The Lord could have just given him a boat, but the point was not the boat. The point was building Nephi. So anyways, I'm proud of you. I want to end with my testimony. As we went through this, I was thinking about 2 Nephi 5. And if you go through and read 2 Nephi 5, there are a couple of verses I want to call out. Number 1, in verse 10, he says that they observe to keep the judgments or commandments of the Lord. So number 1, keep the commandments. Number 2, in verse 15, it says they did work. And then a little later, they said they labored with their hands. And number 3, in verse 16, they did build a temple. And then all the way down in, let's see, in verse 27, it says, and we lived after the manner of happiness. I have such a testimony that our career development, though it feels temporal, is spiritual in nature. This process of developing ourselves and refining who we are and learning these skills that lay outside of who we are is what God would have us do. And we have a sacred responsibility to provide for those around us. And this is a really meaningful step to do it. I know that the Lord is deeply invested in these steps. And each of our lives are going to look different. You read, the Lord told prophet Joseph, his was not one to be rich in this life, right? Which would be a real bummer to hear, right? I think Joseph was, despite lacking education, was really smart and industrious and could have figured it out. But we all have different callings in this life. But that doesn't change the responsibility that we have to better ourselves every day. I have a testimony that Jesus lives. The atonement is very real and is not just for repentance. It is the empowering and enabling power in our lives. And we read in Alma 37 that it's okay to pray over the flocks of our fields and the birds in the sky. It's okay to pray about our career prospects and in our investments and stuff. These are things that the Lord cares about. And I know that as we continue to invest in ourselves, the Lord is pouring out the blessings in us. And that also comes with expectation that we turn around and leverage that in our callings in our communities. So I don't know you guys. I love you guys. I like I said, I've lived in multiple parts of the world that you live, and our parts of our hearts are there, and we aspire to live elsewhere. I can't help everyone, right? There's a lot of people on this call. I would love to just hire you all, but leverage the networks you have. If you've served a mission, go talk to your former mission companions. Look at your stake. There are resources around you, and it's those that are scrappy that are going to roll up their sleeves and, for me, drive to San Francisco to go take people to lunch that are going to be the ones to find success. And anyways, I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Landon. God bless you and your family. And thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll see you again next week. Bye now.
Bye, guys.